Ross. So without further ado,
thank you very much.
Welcome, Ross.
Thank you. Thank you. A round of applause now, even started. Okay, it's nice to be home. I went to Rockwell Primary School on Strathmore Avenue in the 80s. So it's lovely to be home. I'm a United fan. And it's nice to come back as an adult. My perception of space is very different to when I was 7 years old. So it's nice to be home. I've lived all around the UK with my mum and dad's field of work in the Salvation Army, but I ended up doing my degree in South East London at Goldsmiths, teacher training back in the early 90s, and 25 years. Tried to leave London lots of times, even tried to come back to Scotland about 5 or 6 years ago. That was an interesting story, trying to get registered to teach. Took at least a year. But anyway, I got qualified, but then a job popped up and I stayed in London a bit more, so I've been there 25 years, all secondary school. But I started blogging as TeacherToolkit 10 years ago. I lost my job to redundancy. I was a dad for the first time. My boy was born premature, so a really difficult situation. Lost my job, being a dad, 85 miles away from home, 3 months in hospital. So I've discovered a love of writing through therapy, writing a blog about my son to then communicate with my family and friends. And then when he came home on oxygen, so he was only born 1 pound 9 ounces, so 28 plus 2 weeks. I started writing for The Guardian Teacher Network just started 10 years ago. And then I started to think, I had an old TeacherToolkit blog, I rebranded it from Blogger to WordPress, and the rest they say is history. So it gets about 250,000 hits a month, read all around the world. I'm just blogging ideas to a point now where it's become a full-time job. And there's about 70 teachers that write inside the site now, and I just pop in for a bit of fun here or there when I fancy it, and it's great. And some of my bloggers have just become authors this month, which is really flattering. So I now train full-time around the country. I probably work about 15,000 teachers in the last year. Parts of Europe. I'm in the position where I can start my doctorate at Cambridge, working on my 4th book, and that's me. But I'm just Ross, I'm just sharing loads of ideas, and I'm a design technology teacher, so I'm very much pragmatic based. I'm going to talk a little bit about research and theory, as what I can, and then I want to kind of stop myself halfway through and just go into some practical ideas you can take back to schools or classrooms. So you're going to give me a wave halfway through, yeah? So I want to challenge perceptions, my own included as a school leader, some of the bad things that I made my teacher staff do. Reduce workload, how we can change the narrative, and talk about a little bit of research. If you have a mobile phone, I want you to put this on your browser or your laptop, please. I want some feedback from you. So I've got this nice bit of software that does a bit of voting and gets your voices on the screen. It's all anonymous, so don't worry if you're sitting next to your line manager. So it could be lowercase polyv.com/TeacherToolkit. And it activates a little bit of software called Poll everywhere. There's so many versions out there now, but this is just the one that I've used. So while you're doing that, let me increase your cognitive overload and ask some questions as well. Are you teachers in the room? Hands up, teachers. Primary teachers, secondary teachers, okay, academics. Anyone in health or nursing? I'll have to just check. Okay, any part-timers? People doing part-time work? Okay, any bloggers? Tweeters? Instagrammers? Professional Instagrammers? Okay. Has anyone got 2 Twitter accounts, personal and professional? Okay. So these are things I'm unpicking in my research and kind of explaining, kind of being a bit meta, looking at myself and my own journey and where we are now in terms of TeacherToolkit. Right, so on the screen, if this activates, if it hasn't done already on your screen, tell me what you had for breakfast. Is that on your phone? Is it not popped up? Oh. Right, let me try again, hold on. I'm just going to reset it.
I'm thinking that's an awful complex question.
Oh, I think using this computer won't let me do it. Than my laptop. Right, apologies. Okay, I'm going to skip those then, apologies. So what I normally do is I would survey your workload, and I've asked 15,000 teachers, and time again the word marking appears in every setting, primary, secondary, international schools, tiny little primary schools in the middle of nowhere. So my provocation to lots of schools is let's ban the word marking and replace it with feedback. Because feedback can manifest itself in lots of forms, written, verbal, non-verbal. And I'm conducting some research at UCL. We're going to compare a couple of classes in 10 different state schools in England. A teacher that gives the kids whatever, written, verbal feedback. Another teacher just speaks to kids only. And we're going to compare outcomes in a year's time and see if it's the same or better. And if it is better, I'm going to hand deliver it to Ofsted and the Department for Education on a live Periscope video. Grab a quick picture of this. There's so much more I can give you, but I can't all do it in 50 minutes. In here there's loads of things that I found on my travels, some videos, some PDFs, and if I find a nice thing when I'm around the country, I just drop it in there, so it'll just always grow. Plus there's, on the website itself, TeacherToolkit Ltd, I've probably written about 1,000 blogs myself, but there's probably about 1,500 blogs on there on lots of topics, which is why a year ago I opened it up to everyone else, because the teacher dialogue, which I think is its unique selling point, allows a wider range of voices and resources to be shared and heard. Okay, so context. You know, when did you qualify in your profession? Once you qualify, is that it, or do we still continue to learn? Hopefully we still continue to learn. Just for definitions, newly qualified teacher, recently qualified teacher, first 5 years, and a multi-academy trust in England CEO. So it doesn't matter where you're at. You know, I'm still learning. And I think in the nature, or the business, should I say, of education, it's important to keep up with the latest research, science, and share best practice. But the danger with teachers is we have very little time. You know, and training is always an add-on top of whatever free time you've got, rather than an investment. Now, my research in terms of teacher workload well-being, my own as well, started about 5 or 6 years ago. And I started to ask this question: what's generating it? You know, teachers, if you ask a teacher, are you busy? Of course they're going to say yes. No teacher's not busy. So this was from Nicky Morgan, who was Secretary of State about 3 times ago. Okay, so we've had 3 Secretary of State stints. Research says Damien Hines in England will be disappeared in the next 18 months. I would predict when Brexit happens and we have a shuffle everywhere. But 44,000 teachers responded to this workload survey in England. 56% of 44,000 said input and data. So whatever platform you have in your school, input and data, 3 times a year, 6 times a year, 300 classes, whatever it is, it drives people nuts. The second one down is marking. Okay, marking it in this way, marking it in that way. Dare I say, examination boards then stipulate something else, which actually drives workload even further. You might have to produce 3 or 4 drafts of a piece of work to demonstrate as evidence for someone who's not been in the classroom to see that Ross can do X, Y, Z. And I think that probably exacerbates workload as too. I also believe that some schools who might say you must mark once a week or twice a fortnight isn't very helpful either. And I've yet to discover any research that says if you mark twice or 3 times, or with the purple pen of progress, it improves learning. So if you're aware of everything, then send it my way. Hands up if you like a meeting. Okay, I've asked the same question to 15,000 people. No one likes meetings. In all our fields of work, we're always in meetings. And if we hate them, or it increases workload, why do we do them so much? Why do we keep people for a full hour or 2 hours just because it says so on the timetable? When I was a deputy head a year and a half ago, 15 hours of meetings I was in a week. Now, of course, that's the nature of my role, less so in the classroom, but I was still having to meet with my people I line manage and meetings before and after school, 15 hours. Research shows you have a stand-up meeting, it's going to be quick, it's going to go quicker. So if you have a difficult mum and dad, don't sit down. If you walk around the school building or your place of work, it's good for your mental health. So take the next line management meeting you have, walk around instead. And some Asian schools I've researched, they have orange, green and red lines with a number on it. So green for 60 minutes. And normal walking pace, it's good for visible presence, 59, 58, 57. Have 1 or 2 items on your agenda and walk around the place in which you work. I think it's a great idea. I'd probably enjoy meetings as well. And give me a cup of tea and a bit of cake. Okay? Because if we do all these things, it's just exacerbating. So 3 quick fixes: stop telling people to mark X number of times, especially the coloured pen, and let's reduce our meetings because we don't want to be there. Now I was going to ask you all this. Now I can't because the software's not working, but on my travels I've asked 15,000 teachers. Largely this comes back as a third of responses. So you could say 5,000 and this would be 10,000. Could I just have a show of hands? Have you in your experience been in the school, I know we're in Scotland, different contexts, have you been in a school where it grades you as a teacher or in a lesson? Anybody? Okay, good. It's very much the, or one of...
Just going to, yeah, by grade, do you mean give a grade or by grade as in quality issue you're using?
Well, that's probably coming towards appraisal, but I come into your lesson for a one-off lesson and I say that was a requires improvement or an outstanding lesson. Yes, yeah. Yeah. And you know, that dialogue, whenever I've been up to Scotland once or twice, the dialogue like that is very alien up here. In England it's just commonplace. And a lot of researchers expose that grading teachers on a one-off lesson is nonsense. But probably about 35% of schools still grade teachers. So you come into your classroom, I grade your performance, and if you've got 3 requires improvements, you're on capability and you lose your job. Michael Gove follows me on Twitter. I've got no idea why, but all my Twitter influences, I have lots of politicians follow me. He introduced performance-related pay in England, so it's statutory. So head teachers then have to grade your performance, appraisal, and how we do that in schools another matter, lots of different ways. But there's no research to say that if you grade my performance, it improves my teaching practice by payment performance. And lots of multi-academy trusts, large organisations that have a family of 40 or 60 schools, are now grading teachers marking on a 6-week cycle. And in the big trusts, if you're a head of science in one school and another head of science, you're then ranked against one another. So if you're in the bottom 40, I would imagine your job's on the line in these. So they're very much becoming factory type value for money organisations. And this is the dangerous culture or dialogue that's brewing in England, and it's quite worrying. And I think it exacerbates teacher attrition. Influence on policy. This is Mike Claddenball. So Mike was in charge of Ofsted in England, the second in command when Michael Wilshaw was in power. And myself, so Tom Bennett, you might recognise, David Dow, Sheena Lewington, Tom Sherrington, they're all kind of influential bloggers and tweeters in England. We were invited into Ofsted headquarters with Mike about 2013, and we exposed lots of research. And it was at that point the inspection that come into schools and grade teachers, they removed the evaluation form on the bottom that said grading a teacher. And this was a long time ago. Sean is now in charge. He works alongside Amanda Spielman. And I asked Sean about 3 or 4 years ago, why does Ofsted still get it wrong? And his response was because humans are involved and we make mistakes. And my argument is, even last year, when Ofsted came into my school and put it in special measures and then the incoming trust sacked my head teacher, if we get the decision wrong, it impacts on people's lives. People that want to change a difficult environment. I've always worked in challenging schools in London. I don't think I would do it again because it's twice ended my career in a classroom. And I know I'm not alone, and I get hundreds of anonymised messages through my Twitter channels about awful things going on. And I'll share 1 or 2 examples. In the Ofsted handbook, it said when inspectors come into classrooms, they will look for. So again on that screen, what do you see, a black space or a white dot, or do you see both? And it's about our bias or widening lenses. So we replace that word, when inspectors come to your classroom and look for, well, I'll make sure that I'm doing those things when you're in my classroom, otherwise you'll say I'm requires improvement. We change the word to at. So it's kind of just looking at a snapshot and understanding that we can't really make a reliable judgment of what takes place. And that then went out to the whole profession, that simple change of words. And I'm pleased to say it's still immersed in kind of national dialogue. Nicky Morgan's report then produced this paper which 2 years later turned into a poster. And not that a poster is going to fix workload, and we've got all the branded organisations that support this. But again, the research shows from ASCL, which is a school leadership union for school leaders in England, about 35% of school leaders haven't even seen this latest guidance of what you should and shouldn't be doing. So if I'm a school leader and I'm in charge of 200 staff, there's 200 staff where I could improve their lives, but I'm not telling them what they should be doing. My issue with this, and there's lots of things on here, it's got a do, don't, and then it says on the top right, remember Ofsted says. Now you've got the General Teaching Council of Scotland. In England we've rebranded the Chartered College of Teaching. And I think it'd be great to get to a place where the profession could share best practice and stipulate what it is, rather than organisations that come in to measure you. And I think that's what you've got here in Scotland. We don't have it in England. But these kind of things that Ofsted says, Ofsted does not expect to see a particular frequency of marking. Or, if I mark your book and I talk to you in class, you then have to write down what I've said before you actually do the work. Why? To prove when someone visits my classroom that I'm talking to my kids and that you're acting on my feedback. So it's got crazy. It has got crazy, but lots of schools still do that. This is a bit of research, one of its kind, that actually looks at what's the impact on attrition when Ofsted measures what comes in to judge your school. So it's by Dr. Sam Sims, and it looked at this. If a school's putting inadequate or special measures, 4% of the workforce leave, versus outstanding, then of course you're not going to leave. And this is really interesting research. And I have been campaigning down in England to get rid of the grades, because I don't think they're helpful. I think all schools should be safeguarded. I think all schools should reach a particular standard in lots of different things, but I don't think we should grade it. Research from YouGov, so they do a poll with Ofsted. They surveyed 1,500 parents. If you follow me on Twitter, on TeacherToolkit, I'm regularly conducting polls. If I believe having a response from 1,500 teachers on Twitter is a valid survey. Academically, maybe not. But this is all Ofsted do as well. They only ask 1,500 parents. So sometimes when I get a Twitter response that has 10,000 votes from the teaching community, I think that's really powerful data. But apparently only 19% of parents read the full inspection report, which is probably about 10 pages long. Most people just look at the grade on the front cover, or they walk past the local primary school and it's got a big banner saying good on the front. And that's all we don't really understand the complex work that goes on within a school at all. So again, kind of trying to change the narrative here. My son's school was recently inspected, and they asked me in a parent survey, what do I think about the teaching and learning? I've never been in the classroom. I've taken my son to school for assembly and things like that, and I've been on a tour, but I've not seen any teacher teach. So how can I reliably assess if I'm happy with the quality? And it was a 5-metric scale: very happy, very unhappy. It's crazy. So this is the way we're at. This is where we are in England. I was part of this commission last year, which looked at 9 recommendations to change the accountability in England. But this bit of data from NFER, the National Foundation of Education Research, compared 12 different jurisdictions. And what was interesting was, we hear a lot about Finland and Singapore. They have an equivalent of Ofsted too, but they don't publish the report to parents. And it was quite interesting. This is on my blog if you want to download a little report and have a look at the details. But it's very interesting comparing different contexts. But we have to remember that we work in different contexts, of course, and different types of cultures. It's quite interesting. Okay. So why do people leave the profession? This is the Department for Education Census. It goes back 25 years. It's consistent. So I qualified in 1997. I'm over here on the scale, about 46% chance of staying in the profession. Anybody read Outliers by Gladwell? Okay, so very crudely bastardise the 10,000 hour rule. That 10,000 hours of teaching or being a doctor or a pilot, you reach mastery. So if you're in your field of business, academic or as a teacher, how long do you have to be in the classroom to reach mastery? Or where did you first feel really comfortable taking risks? For me, it was in my 7th year of teaching. Most full-time teachers teach 750 hours a year. So to get to 10,000 hours, I need to reach 13 years of teaching. This data suggests that teachers leave, you hear it on the press quite a lot, within the first 5 years, but it's actually the first 3. I'm a design technology teacher, so in England, 303 trainees trained to be a DT teacher. 10% won't finish the training year, 10% leave after their first year of qualification, so 85% attrition, then another 7, then another 7. And then it drops to 2% year on year. So actually, if you work with colleagues that are in their first 2 or 3 years, this is where they need the most support. And it'd be interesting to compare what this data looks like in Scotland. Do we need to go anywhere? All good. Let's practice. So, you know.
That was me telling you.
Now in England, there are 350,000 qualified teachers not in schools. And it goes back 10 years. And for a long time, we've always believed that we have a recruitment crisis. Yes, we have a recruitment crisis. We need 47,000 teachers in England in the year 2025 when our pupil population reaches secondary school. But we've got a retention crisis. We can't keep our teachers. Whether it's experienced or young, people are just leaving. And last year was the first time ever that more teachers left in England state schools than entered. And I think we have a worrying thing going on. Does anyone know this word? Phronesis. I discovered it about a month ago, and it just put a kind of full stop on my teaching career. It means professional wisdom. It's Greek Latin, okay? So in teaching, I will come in and all my bias, I will make some assessment of what you do in the classroom, but actually what I can't see or measure is your professional judgment. Teaching environment is so complicated, you make so many idiosyncratic decisions. Sit Ross over there, why? Because he's giving you a dirty look, or he can't spell the word volcano. These are important decisions in my classroom, but you can't see them or in my decision process. Or I lift my eyebrow and Carolina goes and sits over there because I've given her that look. And a new teacher doesn't understand how an experienced teacher gets a child to move a classroom without even speaking. But that's my idiosyncratic database of years of experience that can't be measured. So the word for it is phronesis. It's a lovely word. Why do people leave the profession? Workload, pressure. It's not behaviour and it's not salary. It's the workload. The job's not sustainable in 5 days of working week anymore. And some people, and I asked part-time, because I used to go part-time before an Ofsted inspection. It was granted. I wanted to keep up on my teacher toolkit, as well as being a deputy head teacher. But then after Ofsted, I wasn't allowed to go to be part-time. And having a young boy who's 7 years old, trying to balance deputy headship, teacher toolkit, and trying to be a dad, I wanted to try and manage it all rather than have to be working night and day after school hours, or go part-time to do my workload on my day off to then see my family at the weekend. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing. Mental health. When last did your organisation talk about your mental health? All the time. Good. It's very rare in some... What's the school? Okay, because it's becoming more of a dialogue. So here is my social research. So every 3 months, that's how many people see my tweets, which is quite staggering. So yes, I have to be polite and kind and inspire, but also to be provocative and challenge government agencies. So I try to mix it up as best as I can. So I asked these questions a couple of years ago. Who's to blame for teacher workload? Is it the kind of government metrics, or is it school leaders? And I was quite disappointed as a school leader to see this data at this time, 71%. I then refined it a little bit. Is it the Department for Education, Ofsted, school leaders, or is it teacher bad habits? And again, it came back as school leaders. And having stepped out, kind of seeing the bigger picture a bit more, I would probably still go with school leaders, even though it hurt when I was one, looking back. And the challenge for school leaders is you've got to fight the nonsense from outside versus protecting your staff and making sure people are doing what they need to do. So these are some messages that I get. I've just been told my deputy head in my school a childcare emergency is not an acceptable reason for attending a meeting. We don't like going to meetings. He's a teacher, so's his wife. Deputy head saying you can't go home. Don't care if it's an emergency. Here's another one. It's been a very tough time. I'll quote him. I'm going to F and destroy you. You'll never teach again. So far he's sabotaged 4 job offers. It keeps me awake at night, if I'm honest. I mean, I showed Carolina a couple at lunchtime today from other teachers that I just got today about inspection coming in. Go home and mark all your books tonight, ready for the inspection in the morning. People are making these decisions. So I was going to ask, but I can't. But let's just have a show of hands. What do you think? Do you think it's school leaders that generate workload? Anyone? Hands up. Department organisations, GTCS, our own habits, or anyone got a different opinion?
It's the accountability.
It's the accountability measures.
Ultimately, but school leaders reflect, stand up.
Yeah.
That's not important.
Yeah. And I think my understanding, it boils down to school leader confidence to say, no, we don't do it like this. This is the context of our school. Research says, or this is why we don't do it because. And that would be my conclusion. So I'm going to share a picture of my own mental health. It took me 6 months to be able to share this socially, and I think with 200,000 people, it's easy on social media to think the world's a lovely place, always the best party, I'm always on the beach, here's another selfie. It's not the real world. So this is 2 weeks after my school's been put in special measures. Half my leadership team's disappeared. My head teacher's off virtually having a breakdown, and I'm acting head teacher, and the stress has come out of my body. So this is 6 a.m. in the morning, so I apologise for the ugliness, but that's blepharitis, an eye infection. I couldn't open my eye. So do I go into school and get on with it? Do I put an eye patch? I decided to stay home. I had an eye infection, insomnia. I think I had about 4 hours sleep over 2 days, nosebleeds and diarrhoea. That's not a healthy workforce or a healthy environment for anyone. And was I going to stay, being made redundant 8 years ago, I wasn't going to stay there again for someone to say, you're not good enough, you either work 80 hours a week or leave. So I took a chance to jump instead and try and change the narrative. So I can't do these, so I'm going to skip all this, apologies, because my software's not working. I was going to ask you about research myths, so if I just kind of highlight one or two. The first one was about class sizes. So this is from Durham University with the work of Professor Robert Coe, who I've done a lot of work with in terms of grading lessons. Let me just put that full size. Okay, so I'll skip through this because I was going to get you to do this on your phones, but basically research shows if you reduce class sizes, it has very little impact on learning. It's good for my stress levels, and yes, marking and feedback, I can do probably more of it, but there's a matter of quality, but actually it has very little impact on learning. Other ones such as ICT and iPads, again, very little research to show that it's useful. It's all right if it's aligned with this particular subject content, but this particular research from Durham University shows you don't need to necessarily have 30 iPads, have 2 or 3, let kids use it as and when it's needed for specific subject tasks. And again, context is key here. Some really good ones, learning styles. Still quite a bit of a myth. A lot of people still believe they have a particular preference, but there's no direct link between the learning styles and how we learn. And when I survey people, whether it's at a big conference of 500 people or 30 people in a room, the results are quite interesting. So there's a hyperlink, maybe make a note, Carolina, TT Research, capital TT Research, but if you put bit.ly at the front /, you'll get the research paper with all the links of all these things that I haven't been able to show you, sorry. So bit.ly /TT Research, capital TT for TeacherToolkit, capital R for research. You'll get that PDF. It looks a little bit like that. It's got all these research questions and then all the links at the back with all the different papers. And it's a good little thing to just pick out something that interests you and then go and share it with your leadership team. I'm going to skip to some ideas. Before I do, I just want to finish a little bit of research. So there's the link actually. This is a great paper. Has anyone read Principles of Instruction by Barrett Rosenshine? Okay, I've got you probably hand these out, I think it's about 15 or so. That's just a one-page summary of an amazing, this is 40 years of teaching and learning research, and when you look at the 17 bullet points, which I'll come to later, it kind of, for me the highlight is teachers have to regularly check the learning. Simply by thumbs up, thumbs down, mini whiteboards, ask a question, how do you spell volcano? If I don't ask you and I don't ask you to recall it, I don't know. So it's really, really useful to have a look at. This one from Durham University, again, what makes great teaching? There's loads of research, and again, that links to all those research questions that I just posed, but didn't get you a chance to play with, and there's the link there. So have a look at those two great papers. Another bit of work, poor proxies for learning. So this going back to 2013 when we went into Ofsted headquarters and said, look, I can't, just because your classroom looks pretty, effectively gauge how good the learning is. It looks good, but it's a poor proxy for learning, which is what Robert Coe calls it. And all these things might appear on observation tick lists, particularly in schools. Again, you'd chat me down if I'm wrong in Scotland, but in England, I come in to observe you, kids look busy, the classroom looks pretty, it's a poorer measure for gauging how good the learning is in the classroom. So that's a summary of this paper. It's about 30-40 pages. One slide's got this little box, poor proxies for learning, and Robert Coe Prof. Co. He is on Twitter if you want to follow him, and he's very open to share all these ideas and research. But that was really beneficial, or significant I should say, for the English teaching profession 5 years ago. I used to do this as a deputy head, and some schools still do this. I'd come and observe you, and I'd stick you in a box. It requires improvement. Next lesson or next week, I'd stick you somewhere else. And as more and more middle leaders came back to me and said, I've just observed Rossi's X, Y, Z, I started to think this doesn't make sense. And this screen's from 10 years ago, this one. Some schools still do this, and then they'd report it to inspectors when they visit or to their governors around the table and say, we're 65% good or outstanding teaching in this school. It's not a reliable measure. And then some research. So if you want to dig out some research with grading teachers, this project, a Measures of Effective Teaching project, they trained observers to go and grade teachers. The top one, 78% of observers got the grade wrong. They'd say you were outstanding, but then someone else would come and ask, observe and give you a totally different opinion. So my top tip, if someone says you're outstanding, don't ask for a second opinion. Okay? But if you're inadequate, then definitely ask for a second opinion. 90% someone will say something different. And I've been there on both as a teacher and as a receiver and also as a giver. And I've had all the badges that Ofsted can give in my school leadership. I don't think it's reliable. So 63% of judgments for this research, Measures of Effective Teaching, were wrong. And for me, that could be your career-breaking moment. Your mental health or you being sacked. Here's the paper. You've got that on your desk. I won't go through it all, but it's really worth a look. And I'll send you the slide. Just click the link. In fact, I've done a little blog somewhere on my site, but if you just type in Principles Instruction, you get your own version or academic links. But really, really good stuff. Right, some quick ideas from Mark Planteach. This is what data now looks like in England. Crazy. Last time I shared this in the school in Scotland, they were like, what are you talking about, Ross? This is alien. Of course, data is helpful. Assessment for learning is me assessing the learn. If I ask you how to spell the word volcano, I assess what you say, and then I gauge what to do next. I kind of differentiate on my feet. It's not me sitting behind a computer, assessment of learning and number crunching data. This school has 75 primary schools coming into one secondary school. You can see the diversity. There's only 14 kids. It'll take you a lifetime of teaching to understand all the acronyms anyway. But then you've got over here teacher assessment. So in England we've moved from a grade A to a grade G, which is now called a 9 and a grade 1. And then some schools have introduced fine grading to be even more accurate. So if you're a grade C, it's a C1, C2 or a C3. And in this case it would be a 3.1 or a 3.2, 3.3. And then if all of a sudden you've got a grade effort, behaviour, current progress and target, that's 4 data decisions for Ross, times 6 times a year, times 14 kids, and some of you teach 5 or 10 classes. Even if you're a primary teacher, you're going to teach different subjects and assess them, then you could be making up to 65,000 decisions in your head to then put on the computer system. My argument is that a secure overview of where kids are? I don't think it is. I actually think it leads to more inaccuracy. And if your computer system blew up tonight, how long would it take for kids to notice their data was missing? Or when mum and dads log in? Or would they say, Mr. McGill, I can't find my son's predicted grade?
I think they're doing all that in Scotland.
They are. I mean,
My experience is
I would avoid fine grading like the plague.
That's much more common.
And then we've got the colour code and stuff. So, if I'm a parent that can't even read English or speak English, then this is going to be really difficult for me to access to help my son at home improve. All the colour coding frenzy, blue there is positive. But actually what you'll see is, this child at the top, the data's getting worse. And actually my argument is 75 skills versions of a level 5, 12 teachers on a design technology carousel at Key Stage 3, year 7, 8 and 9. So that's first year, second year, third years. 12 teachers versions of level 5 or grade A, and then finally when they come to this teacher in year 10 to study as an option, I truly start to assess them more accurately. The challenge is you've got lots of different subject influences or bias saying that they must get this grade when actually it's probably misleading. So that's the calculator that I worked out, how many grades we might have to be doing for just one class. If you fine grade, it's 19,000. If you teach 10 classes, it's 65,000 bits of data in your head that you got to assess before you put it on the computer accurately. Do anyone have a visualizer? I got one in here. They're really powerful for doing drawings and putting kids' work under the screen. You can get Wi-Fi enabled ones. I can walk around the classroom on my iPad, beam your work up to the screen. It's a great way for teachers to model. And if you look at Barrett Rosenshine's work, you need to regularly model the work. I do it first, kids. We then do it together to practice, and then you're going to do it on your own. So it's a really good tool for doing a bit of marking. Other ways of doing it, so you can have a red pen. I walk around the classroom, I'm going to model the work and do live marking. And there's also other things that you can do, is if you teach the same work as the teacher next door, photocopy the work, swap it over, take the kids' names off it because it gets rid of it removes any kind of judgment or bias or stress. And what generally research will show on this is that you can make a decision pretty quickly. And kids know what's a good piece of work. So research here, has anyone heard of comparative assessment? Comparative judgment. So it goes back about 85 years. This is some research I was involved with at Goldsmiths in Cambridge about 20 years ago. The kids on a PDA device would build up a portfolio. As a teacher, I would then see the final piece of work, so whatever it would look like, and I'd be compared against yours, and literally I would make a 2-second decision, and behind the scenes it ranked all the kids' work. And if Ross's kept coming out as an A and other people said it was a grade D, we'd then pick it out and look at it in more detail and then accurately assess it. So the time was spent on the variables rather than the day-to-day quick decisions. So that project was called e-scape by Goldsmiths, and it's now evolved into examination board bits of software. And there's a really good website called nomoremarking.com by Daisy Christodoulou, who's championing a bit of software that would mark the work for you rather than you having to do it. And also it talks about quick decision making to reduce teacher workload. I'm going to get you to do one bit of work, if that's okay. In your pack that you have, you've got one assignment. It's a little essay, I think. It's on first page. You've got a page from Bryce. What I'd like to do, I'm going to be really strict with time. You've got 3 minutes. I want you to skim read that assignment. It's about Christian attitudes to wealth. Okay, once after the 1 minute's gone for skim read, I want you to just highlight one paragraph and mark that one paragraph. Use the marking code if you want. Most teachers go tick, cross, SP, question mark, unless you're teaching kids grammar, but just keep it simple. Find one paragraph, mark it, and then just draw a box at the bottom or a question and say, Bryce, can you do this for me, please? So it's breaking habits. You're choosing one thing for the child to fix and improve. Okay, off you go. 3 minutes or 1 minute skim. Okay, that's your skim reading done. I now want to force you to highlight one paragraph only. We're all teachers of literacy, so you can at least find 1 or 2 spelling mistakes, I'm hoping, even if you're not an RE specialist. Then mark that one paragraph only and find one thing for Bryce to fix. Okay, 1 minute left. Mr. McGill's let his kids out down the corridor. They're already turning up to your desk. This is the last one you need to mark out of a pile of 30 books. You've got a minute to diagnose what Bryce needs to do. So So you can either speak to him or write down a question. If you could just draw maybe what is called as a yellow box. It doesn't need to be yellow. I'll explain why. Just draw an empty box at the bottom of the page. Okay, 30 seconds. Ross pops his head in the door. Miss, can we come in yet? Get out. Right, I'm conscious of time. So here's some examples on the screen. Teacher marks first paragraph. I think probably here, I'm not one to judge because it wasn't my lesson or the child, but they've probably written too much. Research shows if I write lovely detailed work, Chloe, that doesn't actually improve the learning. It's kind of periphery praise, I suppose, but if it's a summative piece of work, it might be nice to write some positive feedback, but the teacher's basically telling Chloe to redraft this in here. We think of growth and fixed mindset, maybe we don't put the bottom line because Chloe might want to do a bit more work. And a good bit of dialogue is to say yet. Chloe, you've not yet X, Y, Z. It might be a good motivation tool. In maths, rather than mark them all, find one, find the common error, redraft it please. Now there are dangers with this. I've got Bryce's here. I've looked at the second paragraph. If you look, he spelt the word there on the second line down wrong. So as a teacher, if we think of feedback to improve that's manageable for the teacher, that means something to Bryce and motivates him to do it on his own, whether it's in the lesson or not, kind of a coaching methodology. One, it doesn't have to be yellow, because I'm not going to tell you off as a deputy head. Plus, where does the research show a yellow pen improves progress? It's I call it now zonal marking, and this comes from a school in Nottinghamshire called George Spencer Academy. I want Bryce to spell the word there in this context forever for the rest of his life and use it in these other subjects. He also has made a bold statement that money matters, but he hasn't told me why, give me a reason. So as a redraft, Bryce, you're a high attaining student. I know what you're capable of. Can you redraft this here? Let's spell the word correctly. I'll test him in lesson, next lesson or on the corridor, and I want him to redraft this in lesson, at the start of next lesson, or as a homework task. And because it's specific and it's one thing that he could do, whether he has mum and dad at home, it doesn't matter. I will be able to build that narrative in the lesson with one thing that he can fix. And it's probably one of, I'm not saying it's a silver bullet, but it's probably one of the most effective feedback tools where kids actually improve the work you want them to do rather than looking at everything or looking at the grade first and ignoring the feedback. Because as teachers, we all spend hours marking all the bits of work. So it's a good everyday exercise. It doesn't mean do it every lesson, build it into your curriculum. Lesson 1 I do this, Bryce fixes it. Lesson 2 I teach him more material. Lesson 7 I use the yellow box. Lesson 8 he redrafts it at home. I teach him more material and then I test him at the end. And you know, research, I'm in the presence of one of my heroes here, Carolina, all the ace the test learning scientist stuff, regular low stake testing. Bryce, how do you spell there? And I ask him that regularly throughout the lesson. Marking calculator. So let's say your school says you must do the yellow box once a week for every child. What's the impact on a teacher? Well, it ends up being, let me just rewind here, 30 kids times 12 times a full term, 360 times. 3 times a year, 1,000 times you're going to have the mark. If it takes 5 minutes, I only gave you 3, that's the maths, divide by an hour, 90 hours of marking. Divide it by 24 hours a day, it's 3 3/4 days of marking. Nobody works 24 hours a day, so it's 7.5 days of marking. If your school finds this lovely idea and says, right, you're going to do it every week for every child. So we need to work backwards. If you're a school leader, we need to work, what's the impact on someone that teaches 10 classes? If you're going to do what I would say is a silly idea, or a great idea, but make it silly. Then we do these things. You've now done feedback to Bryce, stamp it. Bryce, I wish you could spell the word there. Tell me why money matters. Then write it down, and I'll stamp your book. And in England, we have these 3 words. You know, if it doesn't do these 3 things, it's probably not an effective strategy. And I don't think feedback stamps add any value to learning. They're a good tracking or compliance tool. Now this one, I might try this one. This is my secret weapon. So this is Google Docs. I've activated here tools, the voice typing. I'll leave it on American. I'm just demonstrating how easy it would be for me to provide verbal feedback in written form, full stop. New paragraph. Why don't you use a ruler, question mark. So I've been using this for 10 years on Drag and Dictate, Cortana, Siri, all your devices. So I started to use it with teaching and learning policies, emails, marking my kids' work, and then I started to use it with my blogs. So Mark, Plan, Teach, I spoke 50% of that book on my computer, and then the hard work was actually checking the grammatical errors. And if you go to the tools, Drag and Dictate is it's about 150 quid for a single site license. It learns your accents, it gives you little kind of 5-minute tutorials, and you practice all the grammar and syntax, full stop, semicolon, hyphen, numeral 1. Suddenly you can write tons of stuff. So I would argue that why have I written 1,000 blogs and 3 books is because I've just been speaking into my computer and it types it for me, and then my hard work or the time spent redrafting the edit. So you need to kind of look at it as it's typing. But that's free. Google Docs, Evernote syncs to the cloud, Cortana and Siri synchronizes on your phone. If I just do one more quick demo, I just open up Notes. I mean, sometimes I even do my tweets, but you have to be careful tweeting to 250,000 people because the literacy police come for you. I'm just demonstrating how easy it would be for me to provide some feedback on your lesson observation, full stop, new paragraph. That's it. So if that's the one thing I would want you to take, it would be that one, use your voice. Let me just script a few other things. Another thing you can dig out, 14 workload tips for teachers in terms of marking. Great strategy for primary teachers, or all teachers. Kids, before you leave, open your work on the page, because I'm going to mark it. Why? Because it's going to take you 10 seconds to find the page in your book. Times by 30 kids all year, how much time do you waste finding the right page in a kid's book? Primary teachers sometimes get the kids to stack their work on the book, on the tables. Physically go to the book, so it's going to save you time because you're going to have to kind of keep them back and put them in the trays. It's small margins in terms of teacher workload and time. So there's loads more in there that I can't get through today. One other highlight, 10 years ago I shared the 5-minute lesson plan in the landscape of where inspectors ask teachers to provide detailed lesson plans. I designed this with trainee teachers who didn't understand the process of lesson planning. For me, when I look back to my masters, I took 3 words away: what, why, how. And for me, the lesson is what's the objective. The how is all your teaching strategies, but the why, I called it stickability. John Hattie's research visible learning calls it teacher clarity. When teachers are clear and precise about the learning, not the doing, there's a higher impact on outcomes. So for stickability, it's what, why, how. Stickability, if I'm teaching you photosynthesis, why is photosynthesis important? We're talking about the life cycle of a plant and the influence. I'm not a scientist, by the way, so I'll stop. But that's what I want. So physically, when kids leave my classroom and they come back next lesson, what do I really want them to, what learning do I want to stick? And it was being clear about the learning, not the cutting out a bit of paper or gluing in the book. And that's manifested in lots of ways over the years. You know, experienced teachers, lesson 1, photosynthesis, lesson 2, what happens next? When I get to lesson 6, when do I revisit lesson 1 about photosynthesis? So you might want to look at this in terms of your scheme of work. And thanks to Carolina and her learning scientist, the Retrieval Practice model. Last month we taught this, last week, last lesson, let's clarify misconceptions, etc. Has anyone read Doug Lamoff's book, Teach Like a Champion? So there's 50 practical ideas in here. I did a podcast with Doug last week, it's on my site. But his research, Mary Budd Rowe, when teachers ask a question, they often wait 1 second for a response. But actually, research from Rowe says wait 5 because you get a more richer response. So I'll give you some examples. Enrico Fermi asked statistical questions. He won a Nobel Peace Prize. And what his way of working was pose limited information to work out quantities to encourage creative thinking. So I'll give you an example. I'm going to deliberately say less. How many balloons would it take to fill this classroom? Off you go, quick 20-second discussion. Talk to the person next to you. How many balloons? Okay, so if I said it was a hot air balloon, then you got a different answer. If I said it's a water balloon, you got a different answer. So how many? I pose limited information to get you discussing. As a teacher, workload-wise, I can now talk to Carolina outside and talk about a behaviour, or Mr. McGill walks past the classroom, sir, can I have a quick word? Yeah, hold on please. Right kids, how many Smarties in this cup? Or year one, if you're teaching 4-year-olds, what will happen if I drop this cup? It's just different ways of asking, framing questions to get discussions going, and for a teacher, workload-wise, it gives you a bit of breathing space to fix the projector, to talk to a kid outside, all sorts of things. Has anyone heard of this technique? Pose, pause, pounce, bounce? So it was the first article I wrote in The Guardian 10 years ago. I pose a question, I pause. So how many Smarties could you fill in a coffee cup? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I must pause a little more. I then pounce on Carolina for the answer. I then bounce her response to someone else. Do you agree, disagree, what if? How might? And there's loads of ways. Now, I can't show you these because I'm out of time, but in the toolkit link, you'll see Doug Lamoff's videos of 2 different teachers. So here's 2 clips. Let me just explain them. This teacher asks this child 2 questions in sequence. And if you understand the psychology or body language, after the first response, she gets it right, but the second response, her body retracts and, Mrs. asked me a question I wasn't expecting it. I shut off after the first question. So it's really interesting psychologically. The second video has 2 teachers. The first teacher allows kids to put their hands up. The second teacher says, no, hands down. I'm going to ask you a question and I expect you all to have an answer. And it's a very different way of teaching where the teacher stays in command of the dialogue. And again, context is key, and I wish we had more British videos to share online rather than just always looking at Americans, no offence. But I don't know if the Teaching Council in Scotland has a bank of footage for you all to watch one another. With all the technology we have today, it's a really obvious solution. We're all closing the door, we're all teaching 20 hours a week. Why can't we get more video clips of one another rather than relying on YouTube videos? My last thing, the question matrix. So looking at all my question ideas and strategies, I then developed this grid where I would link a question on the left to one at the top. So what is, what has, where is, where has, where can, why is. And it's a really good tool for framing questions. So put an image on it. What is happening in this image? Lesson 1. Lesson 10, which person hit him on the head? How might we stop this man losing his temper? Okay, so whatever topic you're teaching, any image works. So you got this one in your pack. Why is there one man, in the queue? Why they're all wearing coats? So it's a really good way to frame discussions. And if you start with a blank grid, or even do these kind of things, you can say, Ross, these are your questions this lesson. Carolina, that one's yours because you're at a different stage. Or I want you to answer these questions. Or kids, guess what? Here's your post-it note. When you leave the lesson, stick your question, post it up. I'll collect them in and I'll distribute them next lesson. These are your questions. Or print it on, put it as a big poster, and kids put it on physically on the wall. What I've done in my time is print off a blank one, stick it in the kids' books, and the kids write their own questions down. I collect them in, all of a sudden I've got 30 kids times 40 questions to work out, right, well, these are good and these are bad ones. And I've got all my questions planned for a scheme of work that I can use when I repeat the scheme of work. If you have acetate facilities, print off this grid. You can put it on a kid's piece of work and they can peer assess, or put it on your marking policies around your school leadership table. And it's a good way to critique your work. I'll probably start with why. Why do we use the purple pen of progress? Why do we mark twice a week? So that's probably a really good one I would recommend. There's the link. It's been a whistle-stop tour from me. What you've got on your table is a cartoon summary that I've only recently just got commissioned that highlights all the 30 ideas in Mark Plan Teach. This is 5 years of workload research, but it started with 100 teachers in my school talking about marking, planning and teaching. And I guess with the nature of my blog account, as we discussed the ideas on the floor, I blogged them to the world. So they'd either get shot down in flames or they get thousands of likes. And then I worked out what was good. So I'd edit the content, put it back into our policy, and then it became a spoken word when I spoke it on the computer and ended up becoming the book. So you've got the cartoon summary of Mark. Why Mark first? Because as teachers were often taught to plan a lesson first, when actually assessment is the starting point. What's my classroom look like physically? How many kids do I have in the class? Was Ross absent last week? What grade is he predicted? That's what the data I need to then plan my lesson accurately and pitch it right. And I think we need to change the dialogue at teacher training level with that. Other things in the pack, so our wellbeing and workload health check for school leaders, teachers and support staff. In your pack, you've got a workload 5-minute plan, so my 5-minute lesson plan's regurgitated into 35 different templates. That's just one of them. There's a reflection grid. You know, as school leaders, or want to be school leaders, we're often not shown the ropes. You have to learn on your feet as you do it. So, you know, we need to get to a place where we add capacity and have people shadowing or thinking about their next step. A CPD menu. What CPD is available in your school? Just a simple menu of whatever level you're at in your teaching career. What will the school support in terms of professional development during school hours, not on top of or on a Saturday morning. So they're all on my site and they're in that pack for you to download. This one has 2 schools, School A and School B, and all the things they do to reduce teacher workload. One school's outstanding, one school's special measures, and you can see that both schools are doing the same things. It's just the context in which they work and how they're judged makes it a harder or easier task for some. Books. So these are some of the books that I've been reading the last 3 or 4 years. You'll all have your own ones, but these are the ones that really influenced my thoughts. Leverage leadership about coaching. Very coached structured conversations. I know that's quite a good thing up here in Scotland. Flip the System's fantastic. Best for My Child talks about the education history of Britain, mainly England, which is by Fiona Miller, who's a Guardian journalist. Graham Nuttall's book was published after he died in 2004. Again, 40 years of teaching and learning research. So you had microphones on the teacher, microphones on the kids' tables, and what the research showed was what I said as a teacher was often not what was translated by the kids. Which is why Rosenshine's work, the greatest thing a teacher can do is not only to ask a question to differentiate on my feet, but check how do you spell volcano and ask you to say it to me, because if you don't and I don't test it, it's too late when I quiz you in an exam. So it's quite fascinating, those 2 bits of research. There's 80 years there, just both alone. The End of Average, Todd Rose, Harvard graduate, talks about the data and you know, we're all getting grade A's and grade B's and then we're ranked. And if you've got an A, then you're all right to get into college. If you get an E, too bad, good luck for the rest of your life. Really, really good, important book, The End of Average. I'm going to stop there, but there's lots there, and I've run over my time. My email's on the front. That's trying to squeeze 25 years into an hour, which is impossible, but I hope there's something there you can take away, and you've got my email address and loads of resources. It's been lovely to come home, and thank you for coming, and it's been nice to meet you.